Okay, so one of the things that I'm asked the most is what I would do if there was a patch for Brood War. The last patch for Starcraft 1, aka Brood War, was in 1999 or year 2000. And it had some very small changes, and the game has been exactly the same ever since. We've had no balance updates. All three races can win. And yeah, so it does not get updated. No one, well, some people want to update it, but overall, like when it was remastered, Blizzard asked the pro gamers if they would like a balance update, and they said no. It's safer to just keep the game as is. So, I still get asked quite often, like, if I could change something, what would it be? And I normally just give some random answer, but I actually thought about it quite a bit. What would be a good patch that wouldn't ruin Brood War, which could actually make it better? Now, for the record, I don't think that we should patch StarCraft 1, but it's just kind of a fun thing to think, like, what would you actually do to make the game, like, to improve the game a little bit here? So I'm going to go ahead and let you know what my actual thoughts are for this. Okay, so remove Protoss. This is the first big one. No, I'm joking. No, this is serious. I'm going to tell you what my actual ideas are for this. So, okay, first off, I'm a Terran player. Let's start with the Terran balance changes, and I'll try to explain why. And yeah, I'd love to see below what your guys' thoughts are on this as well. Okay, so first up, okay, for Terran. So let's go ahead. Terran. Okay, first thing, turret damage type to normal. Okay? Turrets do very bad damage. They do like explosive damage, so they actually don't work well as anti-air. Now, the thing is, if they're normal damage type, they're going to be so much stronger, so I also want to put the price up. Plus 25 minerals. So you can't get as many, right? So 100 minerals is a serious investment for something like this. So I think that this is a pretty good balance. You see at things like the pro level, like there's positions on certain maps where you build every single square with turrets and the mutas still kill them all. And it's like, oh, that doesn't seem right, right? Like if you put the money in, you should be able to defend. So I think this is reasonable. Okay, for other Terran things, here's some stuff for the medic, okay? Because there are certain things, and I'm addressing all of the super unused units inside of these balance changes and the super unused abilities. Okay, so for instance, optical flare for the medic, right? A lot of people might not even know that this is a thing. Optical flare, blind stuff. It's not actually that useful, right? it's truly not. We almost never see it made. And here's the two things I would do to try to get optical flare used in the game. So first off, research time from 75 seconds to 30 seconds. Okay? There's no way that this would ruin the game. There's like, I think you should just reduce it. 75 seconds is a very long time to be utilizing your academy for an upgrade like optical flare. That, by the way, costs so much mana. Like, there's actual games where I try to use this spell, but if your medic has been healing anything at all, you don't have enough energy for it. Medics normally are at very low energy, so I would reduce the energy needed for that as well. Energy cost from 75 to 50. I don't think anyone can argue optical flare will not be overpowered if you do this. I think that this is reasonable to try to get some use out of it. Okay. Up next, restoration. Restoration is very, very rarely used. It's a very hard to micro and use thing. It's only for like really late game anyways, because it only clears things like I mean, I guess technically it would cure irradiate, but there's no irradiate in TVT. It would cure lockdown. It cures plague. And that's basically it. Now, the problem with restoration is, again, like, the only time you really actually see it used is against plague. But as soon as plague comes out, energy for medics is down at, like, almost zero. It's super, super low the whole time because everything's getting plagued and they're using their energy all the time. So I would just put this energy cost from 50 to 25. A lot of pro gamers don't even get restoration because it's so micro intensive to do. But if you want to do it, I think you should be able to. Whereas when you want to do it, a lot of times you can't even do it because it just costs too much energy. Okay, so that's it for the medics. All right, so let's go on to ghosts. Ghost damage type from concussive to normal. Okay, so concussive damage is by far the worst damage type in the entire game. Ghosts are not used for combat basically at all. They're like, the only matchup that you actually get upgrades for ghosts would be in TVZ, right? Because you don't get marine upgrades like plus bio attack or plus bio defense in the other two matchups where you could actually utilize the ghost lockdown wise. The ghost is grossly underutilized. It's not a fighting unit anyways, but I think you should just give it normal damage. There's no point to have it have concussive damage. The reason it has concussive damage is because it uses a sniper rifle, and the idea of concussive damage is that it does full damage to little stuff, okay? As opposed to explosive damage that does full damage to big stuff. So it's like actually a lore type thing that it has concussive damage, and it's wasteful, it's stupid, it's just not useful at all. So I think that is a pretty easy change. Also, this is a weird one. Ocular implants. This ups ghost vision range. And it actually, what it does also is it allows you to nuke an extra hex out. Nukes are hugely underutilized. And this upgrade takes forever. So I would do from 104 seconds, which is huge. That is so big, to... Oh, this is getting too long. Research time. That to I would put it down to like 50 seconds. If you get all the upgrades for a ghost, it takes like 5 minutes to get all the upgrades. So why not just bring that research time down a little bit? It's kind of silly. Okay, so that's this is most of what I would do to Terran, because the ghost is almost not used at all. The 2 medic upgrades are almost never ever used. I don't know if we've seen even one optical flare ever in ASL. As far as restoration, we may have seen it late game on like a science vessel or something, but it's super rare to see that. So I think those are reasonable. The turret thing, I think everyone who actually plays Terran or watches Terran vs. Zerg can think that that's reasonable. And then there's 2 other things I'm thinking about for Terran. One is SCV range to 1. Because SCVs at very high levels get absolutely bodied by probes and drones. Drones actually have a range, and probes have a range, and they can do things like moving shot. SCV literally can't do anything. Like, if you have a very strong player, they can literally just chase your SCV across the map with their worker and kill it, and you have no recourse against that. You can try to juke and jive, but if they're really good, really on top of it, it just kills it. So I think something like that could be something to consider, but I'm not thinking about that too heavily. And the only other thing that I was really thinking of for Terran is about EMP. EMP it's very slow to shoot, and it's got a very slow movement speed. Okay? Now, the thing that I think would need to be somewhat fixed with EMP, and what I'm thinking of here specifically, there's no real or very little real play versus arbiters. Okay, so EMP is supposed to be the counter to the arbiter, and the problem is that if you launch an EMP at an arbiter, if the arbiter is clicked, like basically with EMP you have to predict where the arbiter will be, because the EMP moves too slowly to hit an arbiter that's moving. So I would like to see that brought together just a little bit so that there is potential to actually hit the arbiter if you're in the right place. Because there's no actual test of speed or skill at all when it's arbiter versus EMP. Because, for instance, if you go to EMP and arbiter and they just click stasis on it, stasis launches like instantaneously. It's not a projectile. It just hits and you stasis the vessel. And the funny thing is, if you had already clicked the EMP and it was getting ready to cast, it casts it as soon as the stasis wears off. So you've also wasted the energy there, and it's done 0. Also, in situations like against recall, if they click recall before the EMP hits, at all before the recall goes off, and recall has a long period where you click it to happen, and then it happens later. So you see things like you will EMP the Arbiter before it gets over land, and they'll hit recall, and then it just flies over the turrets and still recalls, even though you took its energy away. So, some sort of fix here. This is, I think, the only actual problem with EMP. It's like, it's a good spell. It's useful in some situations against all 3 races occasionally, but specifically EMP versus Arbiters is a little bit weird. Okay, so that's my Terran ideas. Okay, let's go on to Protoss. Okay, so first up, and some of these are going to seem silly, but these are like very high level things that I'm going to be talking about here. Okay, so Assimilator, minus 150 shields. So the Assimilator builds on its own and has 900 health. Extractor, you sacrifice a drone to make, 700 health. Refinery, or no, not 700, 750. Refinery used an SCV to build, 750 health. Okay, Assimilators have 900. So you see things like a gas steel, and you tell it to build, and it just builds. So there's no forcing a cancel like you could do from like if an SCV is trying to steal gas, you just go and attack the SCV and it has to stop, and it has barely any health, and it just doesn't really do anything. The Assimilator just builds itself, but also has 150 extra health. So it doesn't really make sense that the Assimilator should just have more health than the Extractor in the Refinery, especially considering the probe tells it to build and it just builds. So I think that that's silly. In line with others. Okay. So that's my idea with that. And then, okay. Assimilator, Nexus, Probe, -1 Vision. This is something people don't know. Assimilators, Nexuses, and Probes have 1 more vision than Extractors, Drones, Hatcheries, Refineries, Command Centers, SCVs. They actually have an additional vision, which is so silly. Okay? Let me give you a real-world scenario. First off, again, the offensive gas that goes off in your base, they see so far with the Assimilator that it's hard to even hide things in your own base from that Assimilator. So that is definitely something that I think is silly. Another real-world scenario, especially with the probe, you can actually send a probe out, like one of your first probes, go to your opponents, go to the main bases. Like, if this is an actual build order, okay? So you can send 2 probes out to other main bases, sneak them in around the sides, and you can actually go and check if SCVs are mining, because you have 1 more vision range than the SCV. You can see the SCV mining, and then you can build stuff in their base, like cannons or gateways or whatever, because now you know where they are at. Whereas I could be sitting there staring at the minimap the entire game and staring at my screen the entire game, and I won't see the probe, and there will be something in my base. This is a silly, silly thing. I don't know what sort of weird lore reason that they have for this stuff having additional vision, but it should be taken out. It should be taken out. It brings it in line with the other races. All right. Up next, the Scout. This is one of the most underused units in the game. We've seen like 2 Scouts in 12 seasons of ASL. It costs too much. It's actually a good unit, okay? But it actually costs too much. I would just bring the price down a little bit. I think if you bring it down a little bit, we might start to see it used a little bit more, right? Because the actual stats of it are good. Its maneuverability is good. Its damage is good. It's just, when you look at how much it costs compared to carriers or anything else that does a similar job, Corsairs, whatever, it isn't worth it. So it costs way too much. It's like 275, 125, I believe, something like that. So I would knock that down a little bit. Little changes are good. I think that that's reasonable, and we'll definitely see more, right? That's cheaper. It makes sense. Okay. Up next, Plasma Shield. The Plasma Shield's upgrade. Plasma Shields scale worse than everything else in the game. So all Protoss units basically have more health than the other races, but especially as you get higher into the game, better upgrades, more units and stuff, the shields on Protoss don't scale well at all. And you can get armor upgrades for the Plasma Shields similar to the armor for the actual health of the unit, but they're prohibitively expensive. I would go on all levels, -100 on cost. I see no reason for them to be as expensive as they are. It's silly. Their upgrades already don't scale as well as other upgrades in the game. I think this is a really solid change. There's no reason why Protoss should have to pay for +3 Plasma Shields, 400 minerals, and 400 gas. Are you kidding me? It's insane. Okay. And then the only other thing I was really thinking about for Protoss was the Arbiter versus EMP thing. So it's kind of a Terran / Protoss change. I think specifically the interplay between those, like I already mentioned, is silly. It's silly how that works. Okay, so those are my ideas for Protoss. Zerg is next. Okay. Some of these might be slightly more controversial. But I think these are actually good ideas. Okay, first off, the non-controversial thing. Infested Terrans are garbage. And they're so hard to get. Deal damage upon death. Like Baneling. They don't do anything. You have to actually get it to explode where you want it, and it's like really slow to do the exploding animation. It has to like walk up, stop, and then detonate on it. It's stupid. It should be like the Baneling, where when it blows up, wherever it dies, it does the damage. You almost never see it. It's still not going to be broken, but that's the real problem with Infested Terrans and why they're so hard to use. Because even when you get them, they just get gunned down. You can only really get them against Terran. All Terran units are ranged. Like, they just will never make it to the Terran army. It's impossible. They have, like, no health. Just make it blow up like a Baneling. For those of you who don't know, if you kill a Baneling, it deals its damage. That's it. Whenever a Baneling dies, it deals its damage. Okay, so that's the first Zerg idea. Okay, the next is mostly Defiler-based. Because I think Defiler is the silliest thing ever made in any game ever. You know, like the Defiler, this is the type of thing that people would put in a cell phone game where it's like, oh, just pay like $1 and like you'll never lose again. That's what the Defiler is. It's like a silly pay to win transaction. So let's talk about that. So consume. I would rework consume. Okay? Right now you consume and you get 50 energy for eating a Zergling. Okay? Now, I don't have exact numbers, but here's the concept. This is the new rework for consume. Consuming unit brings up Defiler energy regeneration by 200%. Okay? So instead of instantly 50, why not consume a Zergling and you get like 200% regeneration or some number like this, okay? So, because what happens right now is you'll be almost about to be dead because you've been greedy. A Defiler pops out of an egg. You quickly gobble down 2 Zerglings and you throw down whatever spell you need, Dark Storm or Plague, and then you live. And that's, instead, think of it this way, right? You have to actually have Defilers before you're being attacked. That's reasonable. Most really good players will have that. So you have to already have them. And the thing is, you can cycle through, right? It doesn't cost much to just eat a Zergling and have that 200% regeneration for a certain amount of time. And then you throw down the Dark Storm. So it's like, the thing is, Darkstorm lasts long enough that if you just eat like 2 Zerglings and you just cycle through this at 2 different bases that you're defending with Darkstorm, or you just, you have 4 Defilers and you just kind of sit them there and you have them all max out in energy, and as soon as you cast, you eat a Zergling, you have that boost or whatever. This would be much more reasonable, I think, than instantly having perfect defense at every base. I think that I like this idea personally. I think it's reasonable. Okay. Now, Darkstorm. So Darkstorm stops all ranged damage. Splash damage works partially, not the main attack from the range, but the splash works in Darkstorm. So that might be a little bit confusing to people. So for instance, a siege tank can technically do some damage under Darkstorm. If there's only 1 unit under Darkstorm, it will do 0 damage. Because its direct hit will miss and the splash won't activate. Because there's 1 unit. It's kind of weird the way that StarCraft 1 works. Everyone knows that it's kind of weird. So just trust me on this. I can explain it later if people need. But it's kind of silly that you can literally have a Darkstorm with 1 lurker under it and hold off a 200 supply army, right? So you can have, literally, this is not even a joke, you can hold off Infinity Marines, right? So it's kind of silly, Darkstorm is. So instead of taking away, right now Darkstorm negates all ranged attacks. What about reduces ranged damage by 99% or to 1, or however you want to put it? Okay, so if I have 40 Marines and you have 1 lurker and Darkstorm, I can break it. Does that seem reasonable? I think so. That to me seems reasonable. It's stopping all damage 100% doesn't seem as reasonable to me. Okay. And the last one, Defiler, -1 armor. Defilers shouldn't be more tanky than fucking battlecruisers. It's silly. You can't actually target a Defiler down with bio. So we're going to take that armor off of it. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, no, Zerg would not get any buffs. Zerg is the best race by far, and everyone knows it. But yeah, I think that those are all pretty reasonable. Did I have anything else? The only other thing that I was thinking about, and I couldn't come up with anything about this, but it feels like late game ZVP Plague Swarm. So, late game Defilers are really good. It's the best unit in the game when you actually get to it. It's a hive unit, so you don't always get to it in every game. But it is the strongest thing ever made. And I think that late game Defilers are a little bit overpowered against Protoss. It's overpowered against Terran too, but like I think there's problems against Protoss where Plague takes all that health off the units and there's no way to get that back. So that's just like you instantly devalue their army by like 50% when you cast it. Also, when you get into the late game, melee, Zerg has the best melee by far. What do you have for melee as Protoss? Well, you can use your splash damage from Reavers, Psystorm, and Archons, but then you really only have Zealots. So I think late game Swarm against Protoss is kind of ridiculous, and late game Plague is kind of ridiculous. And I couldn't come up with anything super good to fix this. The closest thing I could come up with is maybe a late game +2 armor to Zealot upgrade. This is the best thing I could kind of think of. I don't know if this is great, but something like this so that the Zealots are more useful late game against Zerg. I don't think that this would break. It would have to be like somehow you gate it into quite late game. Like if you could get this too early, this would be really, really ridiculous. But I'm talking if we're playing a big split map game or something, maybe something like that. But I'm not entirely sold on that. I'm not as much an expert on this matchup as the others. But anyways, this is my idea for a patch. I'd love to hear what you guys think. So comment below. All right, let me play the ones that came through.
What? Republican femboy cheered. X300, I really like the restoration bit, but do you feel in order for it to be more useful that you instead made it a no effect, to nullify the effects of plague?
That's too strong, I think.
Starfucker donated $3.33. Don't buff infested Terran, that will make that Protoss mission on OG Starcraft impossible. What? Monkey Meatloaf donated $3.33. Two things. 1. Defilers equals Monkat in patch 420.69. 2. Question for Artie, what was the longest Brood War game you and Tasteless casted?
I'm not sure.
Republican femboy cheered. X300, I really like the restoration bit, but do you feel in order for it to be more useful that you instead made it?
Yeah, we heard that. Yeah, so I don't think you should make restoration AoE. I think it negates everything too hard. Just make it less energy. I think it's reasonable. Oh yeah, things like Zerg buildings animating for research. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a very good idea too. Maybe bring some more of that into line. You can always tell what Terran is building and researching, and then with Protoss you can tell about half, and with Zerg you can tell 0. So yeah, those are issues. Oh, Zosty, thank you for the host and the raid. I appreciate it, man. I hope you had a very good stream. But yeah, I agree with that. You should have animations. That's actually a really good point. But what do you guys think on what I put down here?
Jike 970 donated $3. Biggest change that need to be made in PvZ is giving TOS a scouting option between Probe Scout and Corsair. First probe always dies after Zergling speed upgrade, and TOS does not have any scouting information before Corsair. That is why PvZ is hard.
Yeah, I think that's why it's hard for a lot of players. But I think at the top level, I'm not as completely sure about that. You don't see as many Arbiter or Hydra Bus work, because that's specifically like an anti-Hydra Bust thing that you're suggesting, which I think for lower levels would be very helpful. But I don't know if that's something that actually needs to be done for a high level.
What? Author Valentine donated $3.33. Awesome night of GSL yesterday. Got the year started right with that Bunny vs Rogue series. Looking forward to the next group. Also, you forgot the change of reducing supply depot size by 1/3.
What? That's not bad.
Can we do this? Donated $3. Can we get someone to implement these changes in a UMS map, and play a few serious games versus Scan playing as Protoss or Zerg? Would make for really interesting viewing.
I'm going to go ahead and say no, we can't get that done, but I appreciate your zeal for life on trying to try these out.
What? Beardmouth cheered. X300, irradiate does damage to Zerg buildings. I want to see mass science vessels erasing a Zerg main.
That would be amazing. You could probably do most of those changes in the map editor. Maybe not the Defiler regeneration rate or something, but I'm not sure. Maybe. Yeah, I'm not 100% sold on the SCV range to 1. That's just kind of a side idea I had. But I actually think I probably surprised you guys that these changes are actually, they're reasonable, right? Like, these are not bad ideas. Blizzard tried to hire me a couple times, guy in the chat. Right? Oh, yeah, no, I know that the Zealot armor does nothing against Plague Guy in the chat. Obvious fuckingly. Okay, but it was just an idea because of Darkstorm as well. The Defiler is just so strong against Protoss in the late game. It's to the point of absurdity. Like, it's super absurd against Terran as well. But, yeah, Defilers are just a mess. I don't have the numbers guy in the chat. The consume thing is the general idea that you actually have to actively be cycling through to keep nonstop dark storms as opposed to just fucking instantly fix any situation, which is what Zergs do right now. They're like, oh, I fucked up. It's okay, I fixed it. It takes them like 3 seconds to fix any situation. That's not right. No one else can do shit like that. The Defiler was okayed because this was not meant to be a fucking esport or something. They would never release anything like this again. You think a tank shot should deal some damage to lurkers under Darkstorm? No. My idea for playing against Darkstorm, I think, is actually really good. It's funny because a lot of people thought I saw in chat, you guys, a lot of people were saying this is not. You would have done not even this much, right? Like you'd done like 80% or whatever. But I think this is really reasonable. Like, imagine if all my units did 1 damage. Dude, calm down about the fucking SCV range. I said I was just kind of thinking about this as an idea, but I wasn't sold on it. But, the reduced damage by 99% or to 1 damage or whatever. It's like, I think that's so reasonable. The amount of games that Terrans should win that they end up losing because literally there's a 1 health lurker under a fucking dark swarm is so stupid. It's so fucking stupid. There's games where there are 2 Zerglings under Darkstorm and I can't get past. %99 chance to miss is actually even stronger for Terran. This is funny. You say the sane version of Defiler is the Viper. The Viper would be the best unit in StarCraft 2 if it weren't for the Baneling. I want you to think about that for a minute. The Baneling is so absurdly strong. It is so absurd. But after that, it's the Viper for StarCraft 2. The Viper is absolute madness. It's so close to the fucking Defiler, but it is weaker. It is weaker. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that.
Russell 1122 cheered. X300, the 100% reduction wouldn't matter as much if Dark Swarm ended before my hair went grey.
It does last a really long time. It does. Yeah, I mean, that could help as well. But I think, yeah, the thing is, it's just as it is silly. Like, the amount of games you see where the Zerg has no business being alive and just can't die. Like, I'm not kidding when I say as long as you have 70 supply of Zerg when you have Defilers, then you're not dead. You can't be killed. That's it, man. Like, you sit there on fucking 70 supply and you hold on against 200. It's crazy. Oh my god, this is too fucking funny to me that Rhett pops into the chat as I talk about this fucking bullshit that is Darkstorm. And look, Jaeyun's here too. The fucking Zergs are coming out of the woodwork. That is hilarious. I haven't seen you guys in here in a very fucking long time. Hope you guys are doing well. But, yeah, I'm definitely right on Defiler being the stupidest fucking unit ever made in any game. Literally. Hey, give me 1 damage per shot. 1 damage per shot. If you can't field 3 lurkers when I have 60 Marines, you don't deserve to win. You do not. You do not deserve to win. The fact that you only are fielding 1 lurker and you're upset that that doesn't fucking hold infinitely under my idea, come on. Oh, I wish Defiler had an attack guy in the chat. People don't understand that giving attacks to spellcasters actually nerfs them a lot of the time, because it brings up the priority on how they get attacked. Also, they'll aggro, right? The Defiler will see something, they'll go after it. It's kind of funny.
Whoa!